Awesome. Well, I want to start this by asking everyone a question here. And have you ever been in a conversation where it feels like the other person just wasn't really listening and they're just waiting for their turn to talk or respond to what you said? It's pretty frustrating, right? So imagine that same dynamic now in sales. You're talking to a salesperson, you're trying to share your needs, but that salesperson's just too busy pitching their product and trying to, get you to listen to what they have to say rather than listening to what your actual wants and needs are. And that's not just frustrating, it's a missed opportunity for the salesperson. So, good morning, everyone. I appreciate you all for joining us today. We're really excited to give this talk. I'm Jeff Allen, spent the last 10 years in tech sales, working with everyone from global companies to local teams here in Nova Scotia. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's really this: great sales isn't about talking, it's about listening. So, today, I'm going to show you how by asking the right questions at the right time, you can completely change the way you connect with your customers. So there's going to be three key takeaways here today. And since I really want these to stick with you, I'm going to put them right here up front. So the first is being a problem finder versus a product pusher. So we're going to really dive into what this means, but I just want you to think of it's about helping customers find their problems and not trying to push them a product. The second is going to be asking the right questions because sales is, again, it's about listening, not talking. You've got 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. So we're going to need to listen more than we talk. And lastly, we want to make it about them. We want to make it about the customer. They're the ones who want to spend their money to implement a new product or service. Let's make sure the sale is about them and be interested, not interesting. They want to make sure that we actually feel like we have a connection with them and we're not just trying to push them a product, make a sale, and move on. So I want to start with a story that hopefully sets the stage here. I was looking at buying a new house recently. So I called around to a few different insurance brokers, trying to get some quotes, see what kind of coverage I could get. And I told all these insurance brokers pretty much the exact same thing. I was buying a new house, didn't want to use my existing provider, and wanted to know why I should go with them. So I called the first broker and they told me three things. They said, well, we've got access to the best policies. We can get you the best price. We work with all these different providers to make sure we get you exactly what you want. Okay, fair enough. So I called the second broker and I asked, why should I go with you? And they said three things. Oh, we've got the best price. We have access to all these different policies and all these providers to make sure we get you the best solution. I'm starting to see a bit of a theme here. So I called the third broker and I asked, hey, why should I go with you guys? And does anyone have any guesses to what they might have said? They said three things. We've got access to the best policies. We can get you the best price. And we work with all these different providers to make sure we get you the best solution. Does anyone see anything wrong with this? Instead of trying to pitch me right away, what if one of them had just asked a question? Could be any question, but something like, hey, Jeff, I'd be happy to help out, but just curious, is there any reason you're not going with your current provider? They would have found out that my current provider wouldn't offer me storm surge coverage. I was looking at a house on the water. All I cared about was getting storm surge coverage so my basement wouldn't flood out and I'd be on the hook for it. So if they had just asked me one question, they would have known what my actual problem was. And if they had told me, Jeff, look, I totally get it. Let me call around to all of our providers, lock you in the best policy with storm surge coverage. I've got you covered. I'm going to take care of you. No problem. They would have been my guy. I wouldn't have called the other two brokers, but no one asked a question. They immediately went in and started trying to pitch me on how great they were and on their product. So show of hands, anyone want to learn how to not do that? How to stop getting objections, getting ghosted by customers, sending emails just to follow up and actually enjoy the process of selling? Well, let's get into it. I remember when I got my first real sales job, I flew up to Toronto. We did a 2-week on-site sales training where I learned about all the products we had, the features, the benefits, how great our company was, how no one else in the industry is going to be able to help our customers like we can. And I remember I was so excited to go out there on the first day. I had a list of customers I was going to call. I was pumped about the product. My manager pulled me aside. He said, Jeff, if you're excited about the product, they will be too. So I went out there, I dialed the first number, and immediately started getting all these objections. I was like, what? Like, they didn't tell me about these objections in training. Like, I don't know what to do. Customers are saying, we don't need it. Your price is too high. We're happy with who we already have. We need a few other quotes. I need to check with my manager, my boss, my procurement, my massage therapist. Anyone ever get these kinds of objections? Probably, right? They're pretty standard. So I started Googling different closing techniques, and I learned about things like the assumptive close, which is assuming the sale already, or the option close. Mr. Customer, would you like to go with option A or option B? And learning how to overcome objections with things like feel, felt, found. Oh, I understand how you feel. A lot of my customers have felt that way. What I found is blah blah blah. And I was trying to memorize these scripts and different techniques, and I'd make a sale here and there, but man, it was a grind. And I remember I started getting a ton of anxiety just about picking up the phone. And has anyone else ever been like that? Just before a day of cold calls, just absolutely dreading having to make another dial. And it came to a point where I said, do I even want to be in sales anymore? But I decided, you know what? Let's give it one more shot. Let's learn absolutely everything I can. So I read every sales book you should imagine. You should see the library of books I have in my house. I paid for trainings. I sat with the top reps at work just to listen to what they're doing. And I eventually came up with a process it's allowed me to make more sales than I ever thought possible. And I don't feel like a pushy car salesman when I'm doing it. And the best part is you really do get to help people. You help your clients. They see you not as a sales rep that they have to deal with, but as a partner that's actually going to help them with their business. So I want you to remember this on your next sales call. It's not about me. Make the sale about the client. Be curious, ask questions, really try to understand their situation. It makes sales so much more fun, less stressful. You avoid the constant objections, clients ghosting you, and having to really come down with just being the lowest cost solution. So, how do we start doing this? And I want to give you a quick exercise here, really to set the stage and give you something you can immediately use and start bringing out in the real world. And I like to call it an elevated elevator pitch. So we've all probably heard of an elevator pitch. And if you haven't, it's kind of the situation. If you're on an elevator with your ideal customer, give them a 30-second pitch before they get off to try and capture their attention and book a meeting with them. So the problem with that is it essentially just becomes a product dump. You pitch them a bunch of different features and benefits of your product and hope that one of them lands. So let's take that and instead flip the script. Let's make it about the customer. So the elevated elevator pitch, it can be used during a cold call. You can use it at a trade show booth, at a networking event, really anytime. And it's a super powerful tool to get you engaged with a potential customer. So here's the structure. And let's say you're working a booth at a trade show and someone comes up and asks you, what does your company do? So instead of rattling off a list of features or who your co-founder was, try this instead. Say, well, how, and then outline one or two of the most common problems, difficulties that your product solves. So really try to think about what are the most likely problems that person that came up to me would be having that my product or service can solve. And then after that, you're going to ask them, well, what I do is, and then explain how your company actually solves those problems, though turning it into a sales pitch. And then we want to end with a question because this puts it back on the customer. So we're going to end with a question. Could be anything. Could be, what about you? Or are you experiencing any of these issues? And I want to give you a couple examples so you can really see how this flows and what it looks like, because that might be a little complicated, but it's super simple. So let's say someone comes up to you when you're working at a trade show booth, and I'll give you an example for technology sales, which is what I do. So if someone came up to the booth and asked me, Jeff, what does Cisco do? I might say, well, you know how IT teams are often understaffed and struggle to manage day-to-day operations? Well, what I do is help organizations simplify their network management so they can free up more time for different projects. Is that something you guys struggle with? So right there, they came up. I gave them a couple of things that they're probably dealing with. These are issues that every single IT team in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada is dealing with that I've noticed is they don't have enough people. They don't have enough skilled resources. And they need something that's simpler to use, simpler to operate. And I'm giving them that. But then I'm asking them a question. Is that something you're struggling with? And then it immediately puts it on them. And I get to know, are they having that problem? Maybe they are. And if they are, then we're in an engaged conversation together. I'll give you another example, a financial advisor, and this might be a little easier to follow if you're not technical and didn't know what I was talking about there, but let's say you're a financial advisor and someone asks what you do. You could respond with, well, you know how people often feel uncertain about their financial future, just unsure if they're saving enough or investing in the right places? Well, what I do is I help people create a financial plan so they can feel good and just not have to worry about money anymore. Now, what about you? Do you have a plan that you feel good about? And I hope you're picking up on this, but it immediately puts you into a relevant conversation with the customer where you can now dig deeper into that problem. You've made it about them instead of about your company or your product. They're going to be more engaged and more open. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of ABC before if you watched the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. If you haven't, it's an old school sales movie from the 90s, I think. But ABC stands for Always Be Closing, which was their way of saying you always need to be closing new customers, pushing them to buy things. And instead of that, I want you to go forward and try to think of it as always be curious. It's cheesy, it's corny, but discovery and asking questions and being curious, it's going to be the key to you closing more sales. I promise you that. And if you learn how to ask the right questions at the right time, you're actually going to find customers will start to sell themselves on your solution. How nice would that be if you had to go into a customer, you ask some questions, and by the end of it, they want to buy your product? So imagine this. Imagine you're on a first date. Are you going to show up and start talking about how great you are? You're the best guy or girl in the whole city, and all of your past partners had a great experience. They're going to give you a reference. And of course not, right? So why are we doing that in our sales calls? Instead, I want you to think of it like you're going to the doctor. When you go to the doctor, do they just hand you a prescription as soon as you walk in? No, of course not. They're going to ask you questions. They're examining you. They're going to dig into the symptoms before actually giving you that diagnosis. So we want to become those problem finders, not product pushers. I want you to write that down. Become a problem finder, not a product pusher. And at this stage, we're not even problem solving. That's going to come later in the sales process. That's post sales, but we're problem finding. So what does that mean? It means asking the right questions at the right time in the conversation. It allows your customer to uncover the problems and challenges that they might not even know that they have right now. And if you're the one that helps them discover their problems, and not just surface level, but the real root cause problems, and define the impact of those and the potential consequences if they don't make a change, they're going to start seeing you as a trusted advisor, an expert, and not just as a salesperson, but someone that can help them get to where they want to go. And most salespeople, most of us, even if we don't like to believe it, we're taught to become product pushers. And we're usually taught to ask a few basic questions like, Jeff, what are you looking for in a solution? Or who's going to be using this product or service? What's your budget? What's your timeline? And then what do we do after they tell us the answers to those questions? Go right into our sales pitch. Oh boy, do I have the solution for you. We talk about the features and the benefits, and we have the best this and the best that. And it's like throwing darts at a dartboard and just hoping and praying that this magic slide deck that you put up is going to make our prospects want to buy from us. Does this sound familiar? Jeremy Miner, who's a sales trainer, calls it hopium. It's a drug that so many people take every morning before they get on calls and just hoping and praying that this fancy slide is going to magically cause the customer to go, well, that's definitely for me. Where do I sign? And it's just a tough way to make a living. It's a tough way to make a sale. And guys, don't do drugs if you want to make a lot of sales in this industry. Don't take hopium. Because look, let's face it, every salesperson you talk to is going to say they have the best product. No one is going to walk into a room with a customer and say, yeah, we're pretty good, but you should really look at our competitor, man. They are awesome. Like, of course not. No. So customers know when you say you're the best, it doesn't mean anything to them. So how do we differentiate ourselves and not become those three insurance brokers I talked about at the start, trying to sell me an insurance policy? Well, we do that by asking questions, and we ask the right questions at the right time. So what are these questions? I've got 4 types here I've broken out. I had to define these. I've never actually defined my sales process before, so I hope these make somewhat of sense. And I'm really happy to expand on these if you have any questions at the end of the talk. I'm going to do a deeper dive into each one, but let me give you the overall view here, just so you get a general idea of where we're going. So we have baseline questions, and these are going to be, what's their present situation? Think of this as setting the scene. You're getting information on what they're using currently and how things are going. Problem questions are, do they actually like their present situation? What's bothering them right now? Gap questions are, what's the impact of that problem? What's the gap between where they are and where they want to be? And then there's outcome questions. So if that issue were actually to be resolved, how would that affect their business or affect their life? How good would that be? Or what else could they be doing? And when you guide someone through these questions, you're not actually just collecting info. You are collecting info, which is great. But the key benefit is you're helping the customer connect the dots in their mind. And customers will often sell themselves on the solution when you ask them these questions and they see the path from problem to outcome clearly laid out. And this is before you've even talked about your product or your features. And the best part is they're going to lead themselves there, not because you told them the features of the product and hope that they like what they hear. So I want to give you an example from my life. This was about a year and a half ago. I was talking to the CIO of a university here, trying to sell them new wireless Wi-Fi for a residence on campus. And the deal is probably around $1 million. So pretty decent sized deal. And as we're talking, I asked them, so you're going to be spending a significant amount of money on this project. What are you actually hoping you're going to get as an outcome? And to be totally honest with you guys, they hadn't really considered that at all outside of just refreshing the old equipment because it was at the end of its useful life. So I decided to prod a little more, and they said, well, I guess I'd like to improve the student experience and give them the same experience on campus that they get at home. So that's great. We're getting somewhere now. We're getting some more information, but it's still pretty surface level. I think we can go deeper. So I asked them, since this is the student's home and it's right, it's where they live while in school, what do you think is important to the students? And the CIO, they lit up and they said, well, they need to feel safe. I want them to feel safe in their home. And right there, we have something we can work off of. So think about this. We went from we started building them a solution now based on student safety and not Wi-Fi. And we ended up winning the deal, didn't end up going to RFP at all. They just bought our product. And imagine this conversely, when I first had that meeting with the CIO, if I walked in and started talking about how our new Wi-Fi 7 access points are 20% faster than the last generation. They can all be managed by the cloud, saving their time, saving their team more time to work on other projects. There's these AI features that can do this and that. It would have ended up going to RFP against our competitors, and it would have had to try and beat them on price, which is somewhere no one wants to be. So it's funny, after that, I was like, I've got the silver bullet for higher education, man. I'm going to walk into every CIO's office, tell them about how they can achieve student safety. And that's exactly what I did. And the first meeting with a new CIO I talked to, I brought up what we did with this first customer, how we helped them make their students feel more safe on campus. And I was super excited to see if we could win this deal too, how we could help them. And the first thing the CIO said to me was, yeah, Jeff, I mean, that's great, but we have a campus security team that handles all that. It's not something IT wants to be involved in. And that was it. So what mistake did I make here? Anyone pick up on it? I was pitching before I understood what the customer's needs actually are. No two customers are the same. Just because something worked for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for another customer. So don't just take the same talk tracks, the same solutions, the same use cases that you used with one customer and give it to another. You have to ask questions. You have to do discovery in every single conversation. So let's dive in a little bit more. I want to get you more information on all these 4 different types of questions. But before we do, I want to give you an example of questions not to ask. And these are ones that every salesperson has probably asked before. They're ones like, what's keeping you up at night? Or can you tell me the top 2 challenges you're having right now? What are you looking for in a solution? Or what sort of budget do you have set aside? What's the timeline for this project? So from this day forward, we're going to agree we're never going to ask those questions again. Every single salesperson is asking them, and the customer knows exactly what you're trying to do. Okay, cool? Cool. Because when you ask these questions, or you act aggressively, or needy, or attached, like, please give me this sale. I haven't had a sale in 6 weeks. I really need this to hit my number. You're going to trigger sales resistance in the customer. And the prospect's immediately going to close off. They're going to start throwing up objections. They're going to give you one word answers. They'll say things like, I don't think we're interested. How much is it going to be? I don't really have the time. Can you just email me a quote, or can you send me more information? Has anyone ever gotten these objections before? If you're in sales, I guarantee you have. And it's because you're triggering sales resistance. So when you learn to ask the right questions in the right way, in a relaxed tone, it triggers the customer's brain to become curious enough to want to engage. And they're actually going to want to open up to you. So let's dive in. And I want to be very clear here. I'm showing you questions on the slide. They're just examples. There's so many different ways you can approach this. There's so many questions you can ask. These are generic ones. You could have specific questions for your industry. But I just wanted to give you a few examples if you're new to this, just to give your mind a few ideas of what you could do. So we're going to be asking a question, but then we're going to actually listen. This is key. We're going to listen to the customer's response. And then based on their response, we'll then ask the next question. So don't get caught in this cycle of trying to think about what to ask next. Like, it's okay to take a pause, really think about what they said before you ask the next question. Now, that being said, these baseline questions, they're trying to get you started to get thinking about the customer instead of yourself. So let's get back to that insurance broker example at the start of the presentation where I called for a quote, asked them why I should go with them. Imagine instead of just pitching what they could do and all their providers and the best price. Imagine if they had responded with, when I asked, why should I go with you? If they said, well, Jeff, I'm not quite sure that you should yet. I mean, we have to understand a little bit more about what you have in place now for coverage and what you might be looking for, just to see if we can actually help, because maybe you don't even need us. For example, what kind of coverage do you have now? Now, think about how I said that question as well. If I just said, well, Jeff, I'm not really sure if you should go with us. Probably want to understand a little bit more what you have in place for coverage now to see if we can help. Maybe you don't need to go with us at all. So what do you have right now? Don't take away the emotion. Use empathy here. You have no idea when you first talk to a customer whether or not you can actually help them. And when you approach them like this, you completely disarm them, and you're actually able to have a conversation with them where they don't see you as a salesperson. Do you think if, when I ask, why should we go with you? And they reply, oh, we can definitely help you with XYZ. We're the #1 rated broker in Nova Scotia. We have all these customers that love us. You know how many people give that answer? Every single sales rep that they're talking to. So after you have that intro, look, you can just follow up with any of the above questions, any of these questions in the slide here, and get a full idea of what they're doing right now. So what are you doing now? Who do you use for? How long have you been with? And if you want a real ninja move, this is one of my favorites. You can try this. So Jeff, between you and I, why aren't you just renewing with your current provider? So lower your voice, come in close, say between you and I or off the record. And it really creates a moment of connection and trust, and just it gives the impact of what you're saying is really important. So it absolutely is going to grab their attention. So lower their voice, and Jeff, between you and I, and then you can ask your question. All that being said, I don't want you to ask too many of these baseline questions, though. They're really interrogative. They're more of an interview style. Customer's not going to want to answer these all day. So 3 to 4, it's all you need, because then we want to jump right into problem questions. And these are as simple as it sounds. We need to find out if they actually have a problem. Can we help them? And I've given you an example of a sequence of questions here you can use. This isn't a script. You don't need to follow it verbatim. Don't just read off them one at a time like you're a robot. But these types of questions, they help you dive into what the real problem is, and most importantly, why that's a problem. So because of the baseline questions, we now have enough information to ask, do they actually like what they're doing right now, what they're using right now, or what process they're following right now? So in our example of the insurance broker, we could ask, do you like what your current policy gives you? And I want you to think about the tonality I'm using here and how I'm delivering it. Do you like what your current policy gives you? And in this situation with the broker, I would have said, yeah, I do like my current policy, except I want storm surge coverage. And my current provider won't give me that. So then as the broker, as the salesperson, you could follow up with, and why is storm surge coverage important to you? So trying to get down to the why. Why is that a problem? And don't overthink these questions. We're just trying to get a sense of what they like or don't like with their current solution and why they like or don't like their current solution. We're really going to define that problem in the gap between where they are now and where they want to go with gap questions. And guys, these gap questions, they're the absolute best questions once you know how to use them. These are the ones that they have a customer think deep, think about why they would want to change and how things could be different. And they really make them see things from that other perspective. This is like when I asked that CIO, why do you think it's important? Or what do you think is important to students, given that this is their home? It's where they're going to be living. Student safety wasn't on their mind before this, or it wasn't, at least as far as the residence wireless goes, Wi-Fi network. But I didn't bring that up either. It's something they discovered through me questioning them. So we want to help them clearly see the difference between where they are now and where they truly want to be. And that's why we call it the gap, where they are now, where they truly want to be. And that gap is the key to having urgency, to getting them to move now, getting budget approved, and moving forward with that product, service, whatever it might be. And think about it, if where they are now and where they want to be is this big, and your product costs this much, of course they're going to move forward with you. It'll be a no-brainer. The ROI will be there, and you'll make the sale. Now, with gap questions, I want you to write this last bullet point here down, because these are extremely powerful questions. And it's, why not stay where you are? Or why not keep doing what you're doing? This is going to get the customer to dig deep and really think about why they would want to change, how their current situation isn't working for them, and really begin thinking about how they could move forward with something new. You know, we as humans, we don't like to change, but as salespeople, that's what we do. We sell change. So by asking these questions, you're going to let the customer discover for themselves why they should make that change. And then this is it, guys. This is the last type of question. And this is where your customer will actually start to sell themselves on moving forward with your solution. Let me say that again. They're going to sell themselves on moving forward with your solution, but we haven't even told them what our solution is yet. We haven't pitched them yet. They come to this conclusion completely organically. And that's why it's so powerful. There's no manipulation. There's no high pressure sales tactics. You don't need to feel like a used car salesman and feel like you're pressuring these people to make a change. You're simply getting them to explain how solving the problem would improve their life or their business. So, for example, what difference would it make if you could eliminate this issue entirely? Is a question you could ask. Imagine your customer, they manually track all of their client information in an Excel database where everything needs to be inputted manually. It's prone to issues. It might take hours every week for them to get this up to date. What difference would it make for them if they could automate that process? And where the information was automatically validated, it took 20 seconds to enter it in. How would that improve their business? Well, probably allow them to scale to more customers, to earn more revenue, service existing clients better, increase the renewal rates, whatever it might be. So you're going to get them to reach that conclusion on their own. You're not telling them how much better their life is going to be. They're going to explain it to you. And once you've asked some of these outcome questions and, get the customer to visualize and emotionally feel what that could be like, I want you to really pay attention to the last two bullet points here. And actually, I want you to write them down because they're really so important. It's asking them, do you feel like this is what you could be looking for? And then why do you feel like it is, though? And they're going to begin explaining to you why they need to buy your product. How cool is that? And guess what? you still haven't pitched them on what your product is or what it does. They have led themselves there completely by questioning. But once you've gone through all this, it's the moment you've been waiting for. You can finally give your pitch and tell them about your product. But we're not just going to throw everything we have at the wall, right? We're not just going to give our normal pitch. We're going to say something like, hey, Mrs. Customer, based on what you've told me with problems 1, 2, and 3 and the impacts that 1, 2, and 3 are having on your business, I think we might actually be able to help you. Our product does X, Y, and Z, which will solve the 1, 2, and 3 problems that you mentioned. Does that make sense? Why don't we open up our calendars and find some time to go over it in more detail and see how it might work in your organization? So we're associating our solution with their problems and the impact. So we're not just throwing things at the wall. We know exactly how our product is going to solve their problems. And that's really the power in this. And that's it. There's nothing extra. We're not going to pitch everything. We're going to keep it just to those things that they care about and then watch the sale just close itself. And when you're going through this questioning process, you'll notice very quickly that the first answer the customer gives you will probably be that surface level answer and not really give you enough detail to dig into the problem. Don't just take the first answer and just start responding to it. I really want you to dig in and try and find out what that real answer is. And what we did with the CIO of the university, at first they just wanted to refresh old equipment. It was at the end of its useful life. And eventually we ended up at student safety. And we got there by mirroring, labeling, and then asking clarifying questions. So mirroring and labeling, I learned from Chris Voss, and I think I do see some questions here, so I'll wait until the end, and I've got a bunch of time set aside to answer questions, whatever you might need, guys. So I'm just trying to make sure we get through this. Everyone kind of gets a good idea of where we're at, and then I'm happy to go back, revisit anything, whatever we might need. But mirroring and labeling, I learned from Chris Voss. And Chris Voss, for those of you who don't know, he was the FBI's lead hostage negotiator for years. He wrote an awesome book, Never Split the Difference. I consider it one of the greatest sales books ever written, even though it's not a sales book. So really recommend that. But there's 2 techniques that he uses to build rapport and dig deeper with kidnappers. And surprisingly, it works really well in normal life too. And the first one is mirroring. And mirroring is simply repeating back the last few words that they just said to you. So if a customer responded to a question with, we just don't have enough time, you could respond with enough time. And this gets them to expand on what they just mentioned. It gives them more information and it shows them that you're actually listening. This is a great active listening technique. It makes people think that you're really listening to them, you're really understanding them. Mirroring is super powerful. And it's one of my favorite party tricks too. Chris Voss tells a story of a friend. He went away for the weekend on a couples trip, and all he did was mirror people the entire time. So he just repeated back the last few words of what they said. And at the end of the weekend, his wife was annoyed with him because she knew what he was doing. But people started telling his wife how many great conversations they had with him and what an amazing conversationalist this guy was. When in reality, he barely said anything. So mirroring is one of those most powerful tools you can use. And I challenge you right after this call, go out there. The next person you talk to, when they say something, just mirror them. And you'll see how magical this is. You'll probably smile because of how well it works. They're just going to start throwing up information to you and really digging into what they meant. It's super fun to use. I like using it at parties, so at the bar, wherever you might be, just to see how well it works. And I want to make sure we stay on time here. So I'm going to skip labeling, but it's pretty simple. You can Google this one. It's simple enough because I really want to hit on clarifying questions. And like mirroring, they get people to expand on what they just said. And it ensures that you get them to really think about their responses. So those questions can be like, how do you mean exactly? Or what's causing this issue? What's causing that to happen? Can I ask why? Can you be more specific? Can you give me an example? What do you mean by that? So I'll give you a good example here so this kind of makes sense. So let's say a customer says, my company's been having some problems with the vendor we use and we're looking for something better now. And at this point, you can mirror them and say something better now, which would get them to expand on, what are they actually looking for? What do they want that's better? Or you could ask a clarifying question like, Can you give me an example of the problems you've been having with them? Now, this is kind of important because this is a good example of where people might go in and start pitching. So the customer said, my company's been having some problems with the vendor we use, and we're looking for something better now. You could say, oh yeah, we hear that all the time. Our company is, better in this way, XYZ. We do all these great things. You don't know what the problems they're having are, and you don't know what they mean by something better now. So let's clarify what do they mean by they're having problems with their current vendor? What are those problems? Maybe they're huge, and we can upsell them on a massive solution that's going to improve their quality of their business. Maybe something better now is a different product that we haven't even considered yet. So really want to get down to what do they mean when they say whatever they say. And it takes some practice, but the real key here is just let your conversations flow. Find out what the problems are, find out the impacts, find out what things could look like for them if they didn't have those issues. And make sure you really get to the root cause, dig down, ask questions, mirror, use clarifying questions, and you'll start making more sales than you ever imagined. You're not pressuring anyone, you're not manipulating anyone. These are sales you can feel good about because you're really just helping a customer achieve an outcome. And pretty much this entire process we just went through, I'd consider objection handling or objection prevention, really. Because if you do this right, your customer is not going to have much to push back on because they brought themselves there. But objections do happen from time to time. And you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but you want to know how you reply to objections? Any guesses out there? You ask questions. And I'm just going to give you a ton of examples to see how this looks instead of trying to, break it down. I'm just going to show you how this works in reality. So if they say your product's too expensive, what do they mean by our product is too expensive? We have no idea what they mean when they say your product is too expensive. So I would mirror them and I would just say, too expensive? And let them clarify what that means. I mean, maybe they don't have the money up front, but they can pay annually. Maybe a competitor came in at 10% cheaper. Maybe they don't have the budget this year, but they will next year. I mean, we don't know until we ask. So let's ask a question and really understand what they mean by that objection. Or how about this one? We already use vendor X. Why should we go with you guys? You could respond with, and this is a tough one, but really powerful. So why should we go with vendor X? Or why should we go with you? You could say, well, I'm not really sure that you should yet. I think we'd have to understand a little bit more about what you're currently using for XYZ compared to where you want to be, just to see if we could actually help, because maybe you'd be better staying off with who you already have. At first, I'd probably need you just to walk me through what you're currently using for. Now, this is a really hard thing to do, is tell them that maybe they should stay with who they use currently. But watch your prospects start to melt. They're going to let their guard down. Now they're going to get the impression that you're here for them. And they're going to view you differently than any other salesperson who's tried to sell them something. They now view you as an expert. And then you follow up with a question, probably your questioning sequence with baseline questions, just trying to figure out more information. But yeah, if they're happy with their current vendor, try this. You're going to be amazed at how well this works to get you into a conversation with them. Let's say the customer says your competitor offers the same product. You could respond with, let's suppose you're looking at a couple different companies and they all meet your criteria, including the same price. How would you then decide what to do? And this question lets you really understand their decision-making process. And so you can see if there's maybe another way you can differentiate yourself. No two products are fully identical. Even in commodities industries, there's probably a differentiator. So what is the customer's decision-making process? Let's ask that question. If the customer says price is the most important thing, or back to that first one, you're too expensive, you could ask, you would mention that the most important thing to you is cost. Can I ask how that compares to you actually getting the result you're looking for and being able to solve that problem? And this helps take away that cost objection, because at the end of the day, they want the result. And cost doesn't matter as much as long as you've built a big enough gap between where they are and where they want to be. And then, of course, there's the I need to think it over objection. I'm sure a lot of you have gotten this before. But you can go right in that ninja move I taught you earlier. This works great for I need to think it over. You just lean in, say, look, between you and I and off the record, what's really holding you back from moving forward and doing XYZ? Because when a customer says, I need to think it over, I'm sure you know this, 99% of the time, they don't actually want to think it over. They just have a hesitation about the product, the solution, about you or the company. And this helps you find out what that hesitation actually is. And I'll give you one more example here. And it's customer saying, can you just send me a quote? Because we get this often. You do a cold call. Yeah, sounds great. Can you just send me a quote? You could respond with, well, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. What is it you're hoping to see from the quote? Getting more information. They might say, well, I'm just trying to see if we have the budget for your service. And you could say now to this, okay, I understand. It might make sense before I send a quote if I understood just a little bit more about your situation, just to see if I could even help you in the first place. For example, what type of, and then dive into your baseline questions and figure out what their present situation is. So now you're in a conversation and no one's going to say, no, it doesn't make sense for you to find out what my situation is. Like, of course it does. It's, it's normal communication. You can't send them a quote until you understand that. And I want you to compare these objection handling responses to one I actually found. This is a real one. I had to write it down from a Fortune 500 company. So they're a cybersecurity company. They're in the Fortune 500, and this is an example of how they ask their sales reps to respond to an objection. So the customer's objection was, "We lack in-house IT staff, and I need a simpler network solution." If you don't understand what that means, it's totally fine. This is what they asked the sales reps to respond with. Our firewall manager simplifies firewall management by enabling cloud-based tools. With the enhanced user interface of our new version of code, our software becomes more intuitive and user-friendly. Additionally, an AI assistant augments, assists, and automates firewall tasks, ensuring accuracy and reducing the risk of misconfigurations. What does that mean? I would have checked out as a customer after the first sentence. So think about this. The question they asked was, we lack in-house IT staff. I need a simpler network solution. So based on what I've told you, can you think of a better way to respond to this? And what I would do is I would mirror them. They say, I need a simpler network solution. I would just say, simpler network solution. Get them to expand on what do they mean by simpler network solution? What do they mean by they lack in-house IT staff? Really dig down to what the problem is, and then we can figure out how we solve that problem for them. So I wanted to give you a real world example just to show you the difference here. So if anyone wants to try this out, close more sales, please give these a shot. There's virtually no risk here, and I think you're going to be blown away by the results. So you can write these 2 call to actions down. I want you to mirror someone today. All you have to do is repeat back the last 2 to 3 words they said and watch them expand on everything they just mentioned. It's going to be super fun. You can literally mirror people all day. It's a great way to practice. I've heard of offices, sales offices, where they'll just do a game where they have to mirror each person. If you don't mirror someone, you kind of get, I don't know, you have to make someone coffee or do something like that. Like, so they always make sure that every time they reply to someone, it's a mirror. And I almost guarantee no one's going to know that you're doing it. And then this one is, next time you feel compelled to pitch your solution or reply to a customer question such as, can your solution do XYZ? I want you to take a breath, and instead of answering, ask 2 to 3 relevant questions instead. Like, well, what do you mean by XYZ? And really try and dig deeper before just pitching. So that's all I had prepared here, but I'm more than happy to answer some questions if anyone has anything they'd like to know or wants me to dive deeper into anything else. And I see a few in the Q&A here, so I can start going through here.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. If anyone wants to ask and not write in the Q&A, just raise your hand. I seen someone who had their hand raised. I don't know if you still want to ask a question, but feel free. Okay, I see Chinuti here. Just a sec. I'll give you access. Chinati. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for the session. It was really insightful, and especially that mirroring technique. I guess it is really going to help.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's a great one. Yeah. I hope you try it out.
yeah. So, actually, my question is like, I have spent more than 6 years in B2B sales, and it was it was in a virtual environment, and I was majorly into financial products. And my entire career has been practically into finance and insurance and all of that. And now I want to venture into IT. IT sales is something that I feel is really lucrative. I understand that this is not related to the session, but if you could give some guidance that how, a person with experience with no background in IT can actually venture into IT sales in Nova Scotia.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'd be happy to. And that's a great question. I've helped mentor a few different folks that want to get into the industry,
Yeah.
and it's certainly it's a tough time for salespeople in IT. There's been a lot of layoffs in the industry, so there's a lot of talent out there and limited positions. But I'd say if you want to get into it, I mean, sales is sales. Your skills will translate. Knowing the technology is one thing, but I really say is research the companies that you might want to work for. And there's a lot of different companies in the IT space. There's small SaaS companies. There's a lot of them here in Nova Scotia, down in Volta, or other areas that you can reach out to.
Right.
But my biggest recommendation would be treat looking for that new job or getting into IT sales as a sales process. So research the people at those companies that you're interested in, reach out to them on LinkedIn, send them messages, reach out to the hiring manager, and try and sell yourself to them and get them to think of you as an option. So instead of just submitting resumes, you can submit hundreds of resumes and never hear back. I've been there before.
Yeah.
But instead, be proactive and reach out to those people and just say, look, I'm interested in being in IT sales.
Yeah.
I was interested in another company a couple of years ago, and I started reaching out to the reps at that company, asking them what their experience was like, found out who the hiring managers were, reached out to them, and built those relationships. And even if they don't have a role right now, they might have a role in a year or two. And that's how I got my job at Cisco. So I think
Yeah.
that's really what I would recommend is treat looking for a new job almost as a sales process. Do your research, proactively reach out to those people and build that relationship so you get a referral into the company and you're not just submitting a resume. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I see a few questions here. Some of them are around cold calling. And, when you have those high volume of cold calls, it is a little different. And I didn't have enough time at all to kind of go over everything here. And there's so many other things I could include, like, MedPick for deal qualification. I love it's a deal qualification process. But for a software or sales development rep or business development rep, someone that's cold calling, you want to really use a pattern interrupt at the start of the call. So pattern interrupt, when you call someone and you start saying, hey, it's Jeff from XYZ, I work with companies that do this, this, and this, do you have time for a 30-minute conversation or 30-second conversation? They've probably heard that before, and they're immediately going to have that sales resistance come up. So, you can approach this in a different way, but I would say for cold calling, especially, is try to find a way to approach it where you don't sound like a sales rep. So for instance, you could call someone, let's say the name's Jeff, and when they pick up, you say, hey, is this Jeff? Jeff, I'm wondering if you could help me out for a minute. And they're probably going to say yes, or who's calling, or, whatever. And then you can just say, yeah, I've been working with companies like yours on XYZ. Is that a problem that you guys have been having? And just kind of interrupt their pattern in a different way. I know some people like to do it where they call and they say, hey, Jeff, if I told you this was a sales call, would you want to hang up on me? And just something to interrupt their pattern and get them thinking about it in a different way. But as soon as you start that conversation, get into your questioning process. You can use that elevated elevator pitch. So, hey, Jeff, I'm wondering if you can help me for a minute. What I do is, and then kind of help them, or, well, how this situation happens, what I do is, and go into that elevated elevator pitch. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But as an SDR, you want to be doing qualification, you want to be asking questions, and hopefully these questions can still help you out there.
May I go ahead? Ask my question.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
awesome. Thank you for the insightful session. I got a lot of quotes, especially I love the one where you said become a problem finder, not a product pusher. Love that one. I actually had two questions, but your previous answer answered the first question. Well, my one question is how an SDR or an BDR can use these insights during their call with the customers and be more effective. The content that you shared mostly deals with your role as an account executive, and SDRs don't get this much time to do all this.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, as an SDR, you need to capture their attention and you need to get them on the call. So I think using those pattern interrupts at the start to do
Oh,
that will help you
oh,
with that. And you can look up there's tons of resources out there. If you look up pattern interrupts for cold calls, there's really good, information on there. So I would look that up and try and figure out one that works for you that fits into your sales process, because I find that most SDRs call and they all sound very similar. Hey, it's Jeff calling from this company. We help customers do these 3 things. Do you have time for a 30-second conversation? I used to get those calls all the time and I never really wanted to have them. So just figure out another way to approach the start of that call. And I would say using a pattern interrupt is a great way to do it. And then try to ask some questions. You might not be able to get as deep because again, you're on a cold call, but you want to get them committed enough to get on another problem. So, if you get them to start talking about after you do your, and I'll go back to the elevator pitch. If you can just give this pitch to them very quickly and just say, well, how IT teams are often understaffed and struggle to maintain day-to-day operations. Well, what we do is simplify their network management so they can free up time for more strategic projects. Is that something you guys struggle with? And then you're in a conversation. Doesn't have to be a long one, but you can ask a few questions there as a BDR or SDR to help book that next meeting and get a little more information from them on what their problem might actually be. Does that make sense?
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I haven't been in BDR or SDR in a while. I still cold call a little bit, but I'm an account manager for the most part. I work with a lot of our enterprise customers. So it's certainly not something I've kept up on and probably need to touch up my skills, but hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Awesome. Brandy, if you want to go, or Murtaza.
Yeah, maybe I can go. So hi Jeff, yeah, a really nice presentation. So my question is more towards how founders who don't have any background in sales, can start, selling if they have like a very minimal viable product. How can they start, pitching their, because they don't have these, sales skills. What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. And it's something that I see quite a bit with people that have created the products. I deal with our product management teams a lot, and they really like to talk about the product. So as a founder, I find typically they're very proud of what they've made, and they should be. But because of that, they very often go into pitch mode, where they start pitching customers right away on all the great things that their product that they created does, which is fantastic, but it's going to make customers react negatively, and it's going to have them increase that sales resistance. So as a founder, I would really try and follow this process more and build out or really think about what are the problems that your product solves. And if you can build out that framework of, okay, our product solves these 3 problems here for customers, you then have that conversation with them, and you have the conversation around the problem and the outcome they can get from it. You don't talk about the product so much. So you can still use the same questioning process. I think the session's recorded. It's going to be posted. So feel free to read it over. Connect with me on LinkedIn here. Send me an email. It's my personal email. Happy to go over it with more people in detail if you have any further questions. But I think as a founder, you know the product so well. So you end up defaulting to pitching the product instead of figuring out what problem that product actually solves for the customer.
Okay, thank you so much.
Brandy, if you want to go, feel free. Also, we have, I think, some questions in the Q&A chat. Jeff, can you see
Yeah, I'll
them?
go through the Q&A here. Sure. I think I see one here about what are some soft skills that help with tech sales success. And I think tech sales is very similar to all sales. I don't think there's a huge difference. You don't need to be overly technical in technical sales. You should have sales engineers or more technical folks that you can bring in later in the sale to actually build the solution based on the customer's requirements. But really the biggest one I would say is just having empathy and being curious of what the customer's problems actually are. Every customer is different. It's a new opportunity to figure out what are they struggling with, how can we help them. And it's something that's really often overlooked. People think that you need to be an extrovert to be in sales, but I really find introverts often do better because they let the customer talk. And that's really so important. And I know we're getting close on time here, but there is another question of how I see AI and automation impacting tech sales now and in the future. I think if you're not using generative AI to help you build out your sales process, you're missing out. I use it to help me build questions and craft questions all the time. It's fantastic for that. You can do research on customers. I don't see it replacing full cycle sales reps anytime soon, or even business development reps. I don't think people want to talk to an AI to buy a product. I think it's more going to affect the post-sales process, from customer support and things like that. But I'm interested to see where it goes. I know Salesforce and lots of other companies are putting a lot of money into it. So very curious to see how it goes. And there is a question here. For example, a company was persuaded to buy the product. However, they say they want to talk about it with the other leaders. How do you stay on top of the negotiation, or how would you do follow-ups? I mean, I think it's just a question of, who else needs to be engaged in the process, and what would you say they would be concerned about with moving forward with a purchase like this? And those are just questions I'm throwing off the top of my head, but ask the person who you're talking to questions. Hopefully you have a champion that wants to move your product forward, and really rely on them and ask them, what do you think they will ask about this question? Or, is there a good time for me to connect with those people, and maybe we pull out our calendars and get something on the books? So you don't want to be in that mode where you're chasing someone, but try and get out ahead of what those other folks might be asking for. Hopefully you can get on a call with them directly and address those questions live. And there's a question here, just what are the best approaches in a competitive industry? Someone's in the advertising ecosystem, having lunch together doesn't make a difference, or what's the best approach? I find in Atlantic Canada, I get more business done over a beer than I do over years of Zoom meetings or virtual meetings. So definitely, if you can get out to lunch, just having that personal face-to-face connection, it just lets you get deeper and dive deeper with people, and they don't have their cameras off. They're not just on the other side of a phone. You get that nonverbal communication. So absolutely, if you can get people out to lunch or a drink or coffee, whatever it is, you can get on site with them, please do it. And I know we're a minute over here, but I appreciate everyone's time. Please feel free to reach out, connect with me. Very appreciative you all took the time here today, and definitely hope we can do another one of these.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We appreciate you taking the time as well. And thank you folks for joining us today. I know I got a few questions about the recording. Yes, it'll be available. We'll send it out this afternoon so you could watch it over. And please do connect with Jeff over LinkedIn if you like. Otherwise, we'll end it here. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, and hope to see you at our next webinar. Thanks, folks. Bye. Take care.